All right, so we wanted to take a look at the actual ingredients that we're going to use for step 1, 2, and 3, right? Step 1 is the phase that we look at the ingredients and obviously cut this chicken up into quarters. Add a little olive oil. Go ahead and do it again, Layla.
Chicken?
Yes, and then a little olive oil. Yes, correct. And then also we have the Lori seasoning salt, Tony Chachere's or Tony Chachere's, and then Old Bay. A lot of people don't use them all at the same time, but hey, you know, it works for me. They are great all together. A little bit of moderation. Don't go crazy with it. Then we also have apple cider vinegar and balsamic vinegar. Those are really good because they actually help all of the ingredients kind of mesh well together, kind of cook down, and it's going to help these onions and celery kind of dissolve as well. So then we got a little bit of Frank's Red Hot, and that allows a little bit of kick to be added to the soup. And you won't be able to taste that, just like you won't be able to taste the apple cider vinegar. It'll dissolve into the soup and just come out as fantastic. Just perfect soup. You got that right. Also, you have the onions and celery, and we're gonna cut up half of these now and half of these later. We got 2 onions in the beginning. We're gonna do 2 onions in the end. Same thing with the celery. And ultimately, the goal in this first phase is to have that the celery and onions completely dissolve into the soup. Yes. And then we have a little bit of oregano. I don't know why that's spelled incorrectly. I think that's from Italy or something. So we got granulated garlic, and then also a little bit of from the Cab Farmers Market. So we're gonna throw all this in the pot for step 1. Then for step 2, we get to channel our inner superhero and debone the chicken, and then add it back in. And so that's the only thing we need for step 2. Then step 3, we're gonna obviously take the rest of the celery and onions that we chopped up for the last phase, which is obviously, the firmer vegetables, adding a little bit more water, letting the potatoes and other vegetables kind of mesh well together. And then also, not for this soup, but if you are so inclined, you could certainly use pasta, if that's your preference. But for the purpose of this soup, we're gonna use good old potatoes, and it's gonna be fantastic. So let's go ahead and head on over to the stove and get it cracking. All right, so we're gonna add in, like I said, some olive oil. Just a little bit, get it going. I'm gonna turn up the heat a little bit. Go ahead and add in very liberally the garlic. All right, and then over here, so we turned up the heat a little bit, starting to get it going. All right, so that's going to continue to go. I'm going to grab the celery and onions. A little bit of Italian seasoning. And like I said before, it's not an exact science around. I'm going to go first up Old Bay. It's not coming out. All right, first up Old Bay. Shaking up. Oh, and the thing about Tony's, if this is your first time using Tony's, kind of want to shake it up sometimes, but be prepared to sneeze and or cough. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. As you, cause, excuse me. Oh Lord. It's very powerful. All right. It gets me every time. I wish I was like immune after a while. So just know, I mean, like I said, don't go crazy with the seasoning. However, it's much, much better to put seasoning on the front and add water or add things to kind of balance it out versus having the opposite, having super bland soup and having to add in salt at the end. It just, especially kind of what we're trying to accomplish is having the garlic and the onions really melt down and kind of, you know, receiving any kind of health or medicinal purposes that those can kind of bring. We want to have all of that stuff and the seasonings in there cooking together to really do as much good as these things can do to boost our immune system, to fight this thing off. Now, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding in the chicken. Just cut it up into quarters. And we're gonna turn this up pretty high and let it go. And just let it go. Man, that Tony's will get you. All right, and then apple cider, or that was the apple cider. Here's the balsamic vinegar. Obviously, both of those you want to make sure you shake up because they settle. So you want to receive the maximum benefit from what you're getting. And obviously, the main thing with the balsamic vinegar is that you get a little color for the soup. You know, instead of having to use other things like Worcestershire sauce or whatever. So this kind of gets us off to a really good start. And this is going to cook on a higher heat here. And I would say usually I let this cook at a higher heat for at least 30 minutes, maybe even 45. Continue to add water until all of the celery and onions have completely dissolved, and then we can kind of move on to step 2. All right, so it's been 30 minutes, and obviously, as you saw at the bottom of the screen there, 30 minutes at very high heat is more than enough. We want to make sure that we are taking our time and making sure that we properly engage. So certainly you see at high heat, pretty much all of this chicken is fully cooked, if not ready to kind of be transferred over to the Wolverine board, as I call it, to be deboned. All right, so we're just gonna take all of this out individually and kind of move over across the kitchen to the cutting board and debone this chicken. All right, so now we got it on the cutting board. We want to go ahead and just pull it apart. As you see, it's actually pretty tender here, so we want to get some clear traction as we pull it apart. And so just once you get it off of the the main bone here. You can start trying to have some fun with it and kind of pull apart. And now if you don't have these, obviously, you know, some people have like those barbecue gloves, and they pull them apart with their regular hands with the gloves on, right? But these I think are a little bit more fun, maybe a little bit more exact. You kind of get in here, but you get the idea. So I'm gonna go ahead and get in here and get cracking, and then obviously I'll show you the finished product here in a minute. See, all right, so as you can see, we've kind of deboned most of it. It didn't cook quite as long as it had before, but I just wanted to kind of get you a sense or a feel, is that even though it may not be fully, quote unquote, falling off the bone right now, we can still add the chicken back in and then let this next phase, this is officially step 2, as we add the deboned chicken or partially deboned chicken back into the soup. Now, so the end of step 2 is removing all the bones, right? So right now we're adding the chicken back in with, you know, most of the chicken kind of separated from the bone, but there is, so the next step here in step 2 is to add more water, add significantly more water, probably a whole gallon of water, because I'm gonna add another one of these. And after that cooks down for about another 30 minutes at medium heat, we're then gonna remove those bones. So, all right, so we now have the completion of step 2. So like I said, we wanted to add the vegetables in. So like I said, we have celery, carrots, and onions, as well as the potatoes. And so they had an opportunity to kind of cook there, not cook, but you know, sit there as the other stuff was cooking, right? So we added the vegetables. Also need to add in some more vegetables. So we're gonna add in the water as well as the can of green beans and corn. And we're actually gonna let this cook for another 30 minutes, if not longer. The bottom line is we'll cook it until we need to cook it, as we are looking for the main goal of this step to be the potatoes cooking, right? The potatoes need to cook. And so once the potatoes are cooked, it's ready to eat. And one of the things that I did as I tasted in step 2, you probably kind of observed, hey, that's a lot of seasoning that I put in there initially. It actually tasted very, very bland, as if it had no seasoning. So over the course of the steps, I've actually added 2 whole gallons of water throughout various steps of the process. So this is a very big pot. Certainly, if you're just cooking for yourself and you wanted to kind of let it cook down, or you wanted to make less, certainly adjust the recipe. You don't necessarily have to use, 2 full things of celery and 4 onions, which is obviously what's in here, and 6 carrots, as well as 2 whole cans of vegetables, right? So that's that. Adjust it. Obviously, I'm planning on this lasting for a little while. So that's why I made a larger pot for me and these kids you hear in the background.